The Senate Judiciary Committee grilled Michael Horowitz and Christopher Wray. Well, Republicans did anyway. We learned some interesting things. We're going to go through them. Yesterday's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the IG report, in which Inspector General Michael Horowitz and FBI Director Christopher Wray were present and answering questions, we'll get into that fiasco in a second, got off to a great start as Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley basically called former FBI Director, fired disgraced FBI Director on a book tour, James Comey, a liar. Chuck Grassley then doubled down on Twitter. Grassley claims that Comey's attorney said Comey could not present himself before the committee because he was out of the country. But Grassley correctly noted that James Comey was tweeting photos from Iowa only a day or two before, and that there was no indication that James Comey was leaving the country. Grassley went on to say that Comey merely leaving the FBI is not reason enough for him to refuse to testify before the committee. And I think that the senator is 100% right. The senator is 100% right. James Comey purposefully avoided that committee. Why would he do that? Well, we learned from Inspector General Michael Horowitz that James Comey is under investigation for leaking information to his friend, of course, the professor at Columbia, who then leaked it to the New York Times. Now, my basic takeaway from the hearing yesterday is that FBI Director Christopher Wray, I don't know if it's cognizant or if it's just his style, but he seems more than apathetic. He's arrogant, flippant. He doesn't seem like he wants to be there. He doesn't seem like the American people deserve answers. He keeps making excuses as to why the FBI did nothing wrong. And I was glad that several senators, Senator Kennedy, put him on notice. It's ludicrous. It is ludicrous for both Michael Horowitz and Christopher Wray to say, well, it was a small group of people within the FBI. Okay? If it were 4 or 5 agents in an Oklahoma field office sending texts about Hillary Clinton, how much they loved her and how much they hated Donald Trump and how they would do all they can to stop Donald Trump, that would be insignificant. When it was Andrew McCabe, the deputy director, when James Comey was leaking information, when Peter Strzok, the lead investigator on the Hillary email case, on the General Flynn case, one of Mueller's lead investigators until his texts became public, when it was Lisa Page, an FBI attorney who reported to the director and the deputy director, when those were the few players involved, when it was the top of the FBI, that's a game changer. How dare Horowitz and Wray downplay that? How dare they? It's an insult to the American people. Now, interestingly, I thought one of the best lines of questioning, one of the most powerful, came from South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. I've always been critical of Graham. Well, I should say always, often been. But lately, Senator Graham's been on the mark. He was a rabid never-Trumper in the election, a rabid never-Trumper. But Senator Graham's come around. He started to see that Trump's policies are working. More importantly, though, I think Lindsey Graham, while I don't agree with Lindsey Graham's politics, is an honorable enough guy. He's an Air Force officer, a senior officer in the United States Air Force. He was a prosecutor for a long time. He was a defense attorney for a long time. Lindsey Graham understands how the law works. He was incredulous. He basically asked a question that I was hoping someone would ask, that I hadn't seen anybody ask. And it was a question that I've raised on the show and that I've tweeted out. Gross negligence is a criminal standard, right? What did Comey say Hillary did? She was extremely careless. Lindsey Graham got Michael Horowitz, the DOJ Inspector General, to admit that there is no definition difference between gross negligence and extremely careless. But there's a significant legal difference because the term gross negligence that was in the original report generated on Hillary Clinton is a level of criminal culpability. If the words Hillary Clinton had been grossly negligent were included in that report, that would then force a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. By using the words extremely careless is not a legalized standard level of criminal culpability. In terms of language, they mean the same. But in legalese, in prosecutorial speak, they're light years apart. And the changing of grossly negligent to extremely careless was incredibly significant. Incredibly significant. And I was very, very glad that Lindsey Graham brought that up. I was also very glad that Lindsey Graham made the point, and I thought he did it incredibly powerfully in plain speak, no legalese, that how in the world could you expect any reasonable person to believe that the lead investigator on a case, who was saying in his texts to his mistress, will stop Trump, who chose not to prosecute Hillary, who presided over an investigation where the report on Hillary had language change from the criminal standard of grossly negligent to the non-criminal standard of extremely careless. How in the world can you, the Inspector General, generate a report saying you didn't think there was political bias? And I'm paraphrasing Senator Graham, when every American could see there was, 9-year-olds could see there was, if you explained it to them in the way, the very effective way I thought Senator Lindsey Graham explained it to the audience, to America, and the way he questioned Michael Horowitz. There also, in my opinion, were not enough questions on Peter Strzok. We found out that Peter Strzok is going to be administratively investigated. But I don't like that. I don't like that. Now, it remains to be seen if Peter Strzok did anything criminal. I don't believe Peter Strzok did anything criminal. As reprehensible as what Peter Strzok did was, as I study this, as I analyze this every day for you, many times a day, I can't find any criminality on the part of Peter Strzok. And I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to say people should be prosecuted who shouldn't. And I don't want people who should be prosecuted not to be. Andrew McCabe should be prosecuted. I believe James Comey should be prosecuted. Peter Strzok should be fired. He should be stripped of his pension and benefits. He should never have credentials that say retired from the FBI. But I see no criminality on his part. There's no reason for him to be criminally referred to DOJ, just shamed as a political partisan who weaponized his office. Now, we learned, and here's a story from the Washington Examiner. We learned, and here's what it says, the Justice Department Office of Inspector General is looking into former FBI Director James Comey's decision to give his personal memos to a friend outside the government. Inspector General Michael Horowitz testified yesterday, quote, "We received a referral on that from the FBI. We are handling that referral, and we will issue a report when the matter is completed." So it may very well shake out that James Comey is criminally referred for prosecution to the Department of Justice, as he should be. As he should be. Now, Comey, if you remember this, back in 2017, told Congress that he did release the memos, but as a private citizen. Now, James Comey, director of the FBI, before that, senior Department of Justice official, knows full well that when you leave government service, you cannot divulge classified information. Your security clearance and the provisions that go along with that about keeping classified and confidential information confidential don't end when you leave the building. They don't end when you leave the building. They stay with you for the rest of your life. The only time you can release that information is if the information is declassified by the original classifying authority. And in many of these instances, that would be the President of the United States. And so I didn't see that happen. And I don't know what Comey is talking about. Now, Comey admitted, let me read this to you because they did a good job here at the Examiner. Comey has admitted to giving at least one of his memos with his friend, Daniel Richman, a former federal prosecutor and current Columbia Law School professor, with the hopes he would leak them and put pressure on the Justice Department to appoint a special counsel to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 election. So Comey, knowing he rigged the game in the investigation for Hillary or colluded with people to do it, then wanted to hurt Donald Trump even more. So instead of being a man and getting out in front of it, he decided to go through his buddy, leak memos to get Mueller appointed. Now, Mueller's sham should be shut down. Mueller was only appointed based on an illegal leak. an illegal leak by a fired guy, a guy who now, Rod Rosenstein's memo, members of Congress who referred Comey criminally, and the Inspector General report all say should have been fired. Mueller can't find evidence of Russia collusion, right? So his new pivot, his new trajectory is to investigate Trump for obstruction of justice. That obstruction of justice, of course, being firing James Comey. But how can it be obstruction of justice if the Deputy Attorney General who appointed Mueller, members of Congress, and now the DOJ Inspector General all feel James Comey should have been fired? James Comey is now under a criminal investigation by the DOJ Inspector General for leaking classified information. Trump's firing him isn't just vindicated. It's proven to be vital and necessary to national security. We often talk about the president being able to fire the FBI director for any reason. I refer back to a 2011 memo generated by Barack Obama's Department of Justice, and generated in a very ironic and interesting fashion for a very ironic and interesting reason. That memo was generated in 2011 by Obama's DOJ when Obama was asking Congress to extend Robert Mueller's tenure a few years as FBI director. Congress was concerned. They said, well, we don't want another J. Edgar Hoover situation with an all-powerful director of the FBI. And the DOJ reassured Congress, don't worry, that'll never happen, because the president of the United States at any time, for any reason, can fire the FBI director. He doesn't even need a reason. President can just decide he's not doing a good job. And it can be a completely subjective and arbitrary feeling of the president of the United States. So Trump never needed justification to fire Comey. Rosenstein's letter gave him a second opinion from a ranking member in DOJ. Members of Congress referring Comey criminally to DOJ backed that up further with the OIG report. And now this investigation into Comey illegally leaking, as I said, made the firing not only justifiable, which Trump didn't even need, but optically justifiable. Comey's firing was necessary and vital to national security and the integrity of the FBI and classified information held by the FBI. It is ludicrous that we're still having a debate as to whether or not James Comey's firing was obstruction of justice. It's simply ludicrous. Ludicrous. But Robert Mueller rages on. Now, Senator Orrin Hatch ripped the FBI and Christopher Wray on an appalling report. Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah is retiring. Mitt Romney wants to run for office there. I think Mitt Romney is an enemy of this president. I think he wants to be in the Senate so that he can work on impeachment and removal of Donald Trump. Senator Orrin Hatch said, quote, "This is appalling, and the significance of these findings cannot be overstated." Wow. The report identifies, this is all from Senator Orrin Hatch, the report identifies missteps at every level of the Department of Justice, from our nation's chief federal law enforcement officer to special agents in the field. Director Wray, I have to say that I was disappointed by your response last week to the Inspector General report. Well, let's remember who that small number of employees was, because Wray, in his press conference last week, as I said earlier in this segment, kept saying, well, it's a small number of employees. But as Senator Orrin Hatch points out, this wasn't 5 agents at an Oklahoma field office, Director Wray. He says, so let's not pretend like this was some one-off problem. There is a serious problem with the culture at FBI headquarters. And he's right. And Christopher Wray has instilled zero confidence in the American people. Christopher Wray has instilled zero confidence in the American people. Now, Senator John Kennedy, a Republican from Louisiana, pressed the Department of Justice, and Senator John Kennedy said to, I believe it was Inspector General Michael Horowitz, he asked him if he believed in the Tooth Fairy. In the Tooth Fairy. It was an epic exchange. Let me read it to you. He says to Michael Horowitz, General, meaning Inspector General, do you believe in the Tooth Fairy? And Horowitz said, nope. Senator Kennedy said, do you believe in the Easter Bunny? And Inspector General Michael Horowitz said, nope. Kennedy then said, do you believe that Jimmy Hoffa died of natural causes? And Horowitz said, not based on what I've read. Then Senator Kennedy said, do you honestly believe that the American people are going to look at this report and look at those emails and not believe there was bias and people acting on bias and that the fix was in at the FBI? Horowitz then engaged in what I believe to be a whitewash. I completely understand the concerns, Senator, and that's why we've laid all this out here, and that's why we found that it impacts the credibility of the handling and the investigation. And what we say here is not, as Senator Crapo mentioned, which is that there was no bias, but rather, when we were asked to look at was whether the specific decisions we reviewed were affected by bias. And those particular decisions here that we're talking about were decisions made mostly by the prosecutors, not by any of the individuals you just indicated there. And where there was that concern, which was in October, where Agent Stroke was in fact a decision maker, it's precisely why we found the concern we found. The problem in Horowitz's answer is that also in the IG report, we saw very similar Trump-hating, we'll take care of him texts from unidentified attorneys at the Department of Justice. So now a group of eight House Republicans, I hate the report, a group of 8 House Republicans is asking DOJ Inspector Michael Horowitz, Inspector General, to give them the names of the FBI employees and others who were not identified in the report. This is very, very important because we can't have the Inspector General saying, well, we were concerned about Stroke, but he didn't make the final decisions. That's why we found no bias. We found no bias because the people who made the final decisions didn't text things that were biased. But we don't know that, though, right? Because there were other texts from unidentified parties. We need to know who those parties were. We need to know where they sat in the food chain of this investigation. That's all very, very relevant and critical information. Now, I'm hoping that today's House Oversight Committee hearing, where you have a much tougher group of people than you do in the Senate, is going to get to the bottom of some of that. I don't feel it will. I'm encouragingly awaiting the Inspector General's report on Comey's mishandling of the classified info. I hope that results in a criminal referral. But everything we've found out now really does reinforce my desire for the White House to appoint a second special counsel. This is really important content. The House Oversight Committee is also having hearings. They're going to be analyzing those in depth when those hearings are done. So please subscribe to our premium service to get it all at www.therebel.media/shows. Also, go to the App Store, download the Rebel app. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.